Hello. Today's topic is NUS, the National University of Singapore. I'll be highlighting the key points for getting accepted into NUS, the National University of Singapore. Today, we'll be focusing on the UK's A-levels as our standard. Through the UK A-level program, we'll take a closer look at international student admission strategies for NUS, how you can actually get accepted, and how students are really gaining admission. The key point today is that NUS admissions should be understood as a competition based on grades, not on an American-style personal story. The most important factor is achieving top grades in your A-levels. Some people say you need to do a lot of extracurricular activities as well. But remember, these are supplementary materials and cannot replace your grades. You must keep this in mind. Also, NUS has a separate admissions track called NUS College, which follows the American style. Today, I won't be covering that part. I will only be explaining the original admissions process for the National University of Singapore. Among those, I'll be talking about how to get admitted through the UK A-level system. What kind of university is NUS? It's the representative University of Singapore. It's a comprehensive university. Just as Korea has Seoul National University, Hong Kong has the University of Hong Kong, and the US has Harvard and the Ivy League schools. And in the UK, there are famous universities like Oxford, Cambridge, and those in London. Just like those universities, the National University of Singapore, or NUS, is the top university in Singapore. It is a comprehensive university that covers all fields, including engineering, computing, business, medicine, law, humanities, and social sciences, and science. Shall we take a look at the numbers? The undergraduate student body is over 30,000. There are also more than 60 majors and over 200 student organizations. It is a large university with a very big campus. According to the 2026 QS World Rankings, NUS is ranked 8th in the world. And there is a separate ranking for Asian universities, where another university in Singapore is also featured. Together with NTU, it is ranked joint 3rd. And in the individual ranking for computer science, which is very popular these days, it is tied for 4th place with the University of Oxford in the UK. These rankings can be considered objective indicators that show global competitiveness. Shall we take a look at Korea's KII universities? Seoul National University is ranked 38th, Yonsei University 52nd, and Korea University 61st. Looking at these rankings, you can compare them with Singapore's public university, which is ranked 8th in the world. What benefits do universities gain from having high rankings? First of all, thank you. There is the effect of attracting outstanding students. And secondly, a lot of international students gather there. Third, there is active engagement in areas such as research funding, donations, industry-academia cooperation, and partnerships. There is also competitiveness when it comes to hiring faculty. The expansion of global partnerships is also very active. Above all, the brand value of graduates can increase significantly. Universities all over the world are fiercely competing for rankings like this. NUS is the only university in Asia that ranks within the top 10 in the world. First of all, NUS is a university open to international students. It is a very international university. A wide variety of international students are being admitted, and they operate a separate admissions process for international students. And when international students are admitted, they go through the admissions process smoothly with the help of various programs. Because so many diverse international students are admitted, the competition rate is extremely high at this university. Let's take a look at the admission requirements based on the UK A-levels. For reference, all A-levels from Cambridge, Edexcel, AQA, and OCR are recognized as the same A-levels in the UK. The minimum application requirement is 3 A-level subjects. However, to actually be accepted, you should apply with more than 3 subjects, ideally 4 or more. If I had to sum up NUS admissions in one word, it would be academic merit. It's all about grades. Basically, to get accepted into NUS, you absolutely need to have good grades. People also say this. You also need to work hard on extracurricular activities to get into NUS. Of course, participating in extracurricular activities is very important in itself, but unfortunately they don't carry much weight at NUS. You can consider grades to be the number one priority, in fact. Of course, extracurricular activities can leave a good impression, but they don't have the special influence to make up for lacking A-level grades. There are exceptions though. If your extracurriculars aren't just limited to things like sports or music, but also include academic achievements like winning an award at an international Olympiad, then that can be a huge advantage. But in reality, getting top grades in A-levels is much more common than winning an award at an international Olympiad. People often say that when it comes to NUS, grades are everything, 100%. That's because the competition is centered around academic performance. Officially, they say you should prepare not only academically, but also in non-academic areas. But in practice, when you actually go through the admissions process, you'll see that students are ultimately selected based on their grades. When it comes to top universities in the US, of course grades are important, but people often say that extracurricular activities are just as important, and that's actually true. They say it's hard to get in by just studying. But in the case of NUS in Singapore, you can think of it as a university you get into purely based on academics. Realistically, the grades required for admission are exactly that. In most cases, an A-star, an A-star, an A-star, and an 8th. Usually, achieving 3 A-star grades and 1 A is considered to be the absolute minimum requirement for the cutoff. However, having these grades doesn't guarantee admission every year. So if you've set NUS as your top choice university, you should aim to get at least A in your subjects to have a stable chance of being accepted. This can also vary depending on the department, especially for certain specialized majors. For example, medicine or law, these departments have separate entrance exams or interviews, so they are exceptions. I'm talking about general majors here. So, is it possible to get accepted with just 3 A-level subjects as stated on the university website? Although the university states that the minimum requirement is 3 subjects, in my experience, I have never seen anyone get accepted to NUS with just 3 subjects. There have been cases where someone had 3 A grades and 1 A but still did not get in. That's why you absolutely need to prepare at least 4 subjects. The level of difficulty varies by major. Of course, Singapore has traditionally been a region where business is popular. And fields like computing, engineering, and of course, specialized programs such as medicine and law have also traditionally been popular majors in Singapore. Since majors like computer engineering and general engineering are extremely popular, there can be certain variables involved. That's why, in order to be accepted, you absolutely need to have high grades. And there's another important point, the required prerequisite courses for the major you want to apply to. For example, if it's related to engineering or computing, in this field, mathematics is the core subject. Similarly, for business and economics, mathematics is also a required subject. For science or medical fields, subjects like chemistry, biology, and physics are required courses, so you must check in advance the list of required subjects provided on the university's official website. Therefore, since universities located in Singapore still continue to preserve a significant portion of the traditional British academic style, you first need to decide upon the specific major you wish to pursue. Next, you will need to determine exactly which particular academic subjects and modules you are mandatory required to successfully complete. For medicine, law, and dentistry, not only do you need high final grades, but there are also separate entrance exams and interviews, so I will exclude these from today's explanation. Additionally, these departments mainly focus on selecting Singaporean students, so there are very few cases of foreigners being admitted. Therefore, there really isn't much information available. My niece in Singapore is currently attending medical school, so I can provide as much information as needed. There's also NUS College. It used to be called Yale NUS College. At one time, Yale University in the United States operated a program within NUS in Singapore. After that program was withdrawn, NUS began running its own American-style college program, which is now called NUS College. For this program, when you apply to NUS, if you wish to apply specifically to NUS College, there is a separate American-style application form that you need to fill out, in addition to the regular NUS application. Today, I will skip the explanation about NUS College as well. Now let's talk about the application timing. Generally, the application deadline is at the end of February every year. You absolutely must submit your actual results. If your grades are available by the end of February, that's the cleanest and most straightforward situation. And there are some students who take the UK A-level exams in January. The results come out in the first week of March, and even in these cases, you can proceed to university without any issues. But there are even more important things to consider, and we've already explained a lot about these topics. It's very important to know what Singaporean students do after graduating from high school and before entering university. These are things you absolutely need to think about before enrolling. Now let's talk about admission strategies. First, you have to choose your subjects. It's always 4 subjects. 3 subjects are simply not enough. You must prepare at least 4 subjects, no exceptions. And for these 4 subjects, you should absolutely aim for the 4 A-star strategy. While it's true that you can get accepted with 3 A-stars and 1 A, depending on the timing, this can be quite risky. It all comes down to the number of A's you have. The strongest recommendation is to make sure you get 4 A-stars no matter what. In Singapore's college admissions, there is a system called attitude-based admission. Based on this, people have said for a while that aptitude is just as important as grades. But in the end, that's a misunderstanding. Ultimately, you need good grades to be accepted. If your grades are low, it doesn't mean anything. If you look at it from the American perspective of holistic admissions, NUS is actually a place where it's easy to get rejected. So you should understand it like this. Top-level grades are absolutely essential, and then ABA serves as supplementary material to show your suitability for your major. At NUS in Singapore, you can list your first and second choices and even up to your 5th or 8th choice, but they still cut off applicants based on grades. Singapore has its own A-levels. We've organized a lot of information about the Singapore A-level admission system on our Nava Cafe and other places, but since it's not relevant today, I'll skip that part. NUS is definitely a difficult university to get into. However, it can also be easy to get in. Of course, that's relative. If your grades are good, it's easy to get in, but if your grades aren't good, it becomes harder or you might not get in at all. Business majors in Singapore are very popular and have good prospects. According to our A-level standards, math is a required subject, and business, accounting, and economics are related subjects. In fact, math is essential, and business, accounting, and economics are connected subjects. Students can study these with a similar perspective, making them very efficient subjects for getting into NUS Business School. In fact, we've produced a lot of A students with this model, and many have been accepted to NUS with these grades. For science majors, it's math plus science. Of course, science includes biology, chemistry, and physics, and while each has its own characteristics, science students are generally advised to take science subjects as required courses. Even if you avoid them now, you'll have to study them in college anyway. Therefore, for science and engineering majors, it's best to take all the science subjects. If you add further math to math, that makes 5 subjects. We've produced many students who achieved 5 A-star grades in these 5 subjects. When you strategize like this to get A-stars, your chances of acceptance go up to over 99%. It would actually be strange not to get in. This is a real example of acceptance. As I mentioned earlier, by getting A-stars in math, accounting, business, and economics, students were accepted not only to NUS but also to NTU. SMU is just a bonus. Therefore, when it comes to getting into NUS, simply showing your competitiveness through your grades is absolutely essential. Here's another case, this time for a popular major in Singapore, computer science. This is a science field, and by achieving a star in 5 subjects, math, physics, chemistry, and economics, this student was accepted into computer science. Achieving 4 A-stars or 5 A-stars is by no means easy. It's extremely difficult, and honestly, I don't think anyone else in Korea can do it besides us. Getting 4 A-star or 5 A-star is really difficult. If you want to get into NUS, grades are absolutely everything. You don't need anything else. Nothing else matters. Just decide on your target major and check the subject requirements. Get A bar in 4 subjects, and honestly, you don't even need to do extracurricular activities. If you prioritize perfecting your grades, you'll get accepted to NUS. Since there are no intermediate steps, once you have your grades ready, you're all set. You're almost guaranteed to be accepted, but there is a process for achieving those grades, and there are standards you must follow. You can't just do things your own way and get 4 A-star. NUS is the top university in Asia, and of course, one of the best in the world. If you prepare, you can get in. Every year, we show you examples of successful admissions. That's all for today. Thank you.